Hello, friends. Hello, speakers in this panel discussion, and hello, good afternoon to the audience who is joining us from around the world. Welcome to this webinar, CX 2.0, from digital to emotional. I'm your host. My name is Manoj Agrawal. I'm the group editor at Banking Frontiers magazine, a magazine that has been around for over 20 years, hearing the financial sector and sharing with you what the financial sector is thinking and doing. For this webinar, I have three esteemed panelists with me, and we expect a fourth one to join us. Before we start, I'd like each of you to give your 15 to 20-second background about yourselves. Can we start with you, Deepu?
Yeah. Thank you, Manoj. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure being here. My name is Deepu, and I work with Bajaj Allianz General Insurance, driving digital transformation and innovation. Prior to this, I worked with GE Capital for 20 years.
Fantastic.
My name is Shrikant. I'm currently with DBS Bank India as the MD and CIO for DBS India. I come from a technology background, having worked for big companies like Microsoft in my past life. And then currently I'm leading technology for DBS India.
My name is Gokul. I run the Asia business for Unifor. Extremely thrilled to be here. I'm an engineer by education. Right now I run the entire business. Thanks again for having me today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gokul. So friends, we are doing this webinar on a topic from digital to emotional. So all this while the journey has been from manual or some other process to a digital process. The question now is, can other sectors, can other industries that serve customers, individuals and businesses leverage the capacity of human emotions, leverage the intelligence that is embedded within human emotions, and improve their own business processes, improve their own products, improve the customer experience, have a better relationship with the customer, have a deeper loyalty with the customers. All these are exciting opportunities to explore. Of course, the future is unknown, but of course, the future is going to be invented by us. And I have with me some people who are working in inventing that future. So let's hear from each of them. What is the kind of future they envisage, where man-machine communication, man-machine engagement, where man-machine dialogue is much more human-centric, much more, it takes advantages of what human emotions offer and builds a better business case for the business and for the customers.
No, thank you, Manoj. It's an interesting topic, combination of man and machine, because the whole accent at the start of the pandemic was moving from the physical world to the digital world. And now that we are back in the, in the physical world, in a manner of speaking, in the sense we're now in the post-COVID world, the whole accent has shifted, like you rightly mentioned, Manoj, in your opening note, to humanizing the digital, right? Earlier it was, digitizing the physical, but now it's humanizing the digital. How do you get the best of digital efficiency while, you get them to, mimic human behavior? So a couple of areas, I'll explain now with practical examples. So when we had digital assets servicing customers during the pandemic, we need to understand that, it's not about an overnight switch from 100% manual up to 100% digital. You also need to have a handshake. So for example, if our bot, was not able to answer a few queries of customers because the bot learns from past experiences, a human being would swing into action and take the transaction, that particular transaction through to completion. So for the customer, there is no break in service. It's a good combination of digital and physical. And over a period of time, based on these interactions, we kept teaching the bot. So the bot kept learning all the time, and its own percentage of, first time right, kept on increasing. So that's how, we were able to get a good combination of, man and machine going. The other is, in terms of humanizing the digital, let's take again health insurance, because better to give you practical examples of what have been done. When customers basically go into hospitals, their primary focus is recovery. Somebody is unwell and they could be, mentally and physically stressed, and, they want to recover. That's not a time when they want to navigate the complex, administrative layout in hospitals. Go to multiple departments for tests, get reports from multiple departments, go to billing, go for billing to one place, go for procedures to another place. So we deployed virtual relationship managers, whereby the entire processing was digital, but the relationship manager would give loads of empathy to the customer, and they just loved it. It would become an actual combination of man and machine, and we actually got a score done on this. We took an NPS on this particular initiative. Pleasantly surprised to know that this got us an NPS in excess of 90, which is very rare. NPS of 90 is very rare, and we didn't have a single detractor. So I think some of these experiences, whereby we've seen a combination of man and machine, I think will set the trend going forward.
Yes, thank you, Deepu, for those opening remarks, for those examples. Shrikant, would you like to take up next, give a banking perspective to this?
Absolutely, Manoj, and great set of use cases shared by Deepu earlier, and also share some perspectives around what we are doing within the banking sector, specifically around DBS. And I also like the title for our session today. That's really sums it up in a lot of ways around where the world in general is headed as well. It's not just about becoming digital any longer, but there is a human element, there is an emotional element that needs to be brought in. And pandemic has driven that message quite loud and clear for all of us here. So just to set the context and perspective a little while, most of us probably know that DBS was rated best bank in the world about 2 years back. And 3 years in a running, we've been winning that award. And we changed the tune a little bit. And in fact, the current setting right now is best bank for a better world. That in a lot of ways actually communicates what we are actually striving to do. The better world brings in the humanizing element to it, and then how the leaps and bounds of the transformation that we've achieved in terms of digitalization, how it meshes with the humanizing element from a better world standpoint. Just to put the perspective in the context here, we've started on this journey, I think about 5-6 years back around the whole digitization, and said, DBS will now become a technology company. And what does the element of a technology company look like? Is first and foremost, we need to own our technology. At that point in time, we did not own our technology. We largely bought it from vendor products and so on and so forth. The first step was to try and insource all of the technology. And while we were doing that, we've also said, now let's start reimagining how this technology should be digitized, because the technology was largely built for commoditized and so on and so forth. It was not really serving the customer at a personalization level, right? So we started realizing that. At the same time, we also thought that the 5-year trends, or the mega trends, or the meta trends, as we would like to call it, is leading towards these kinds of hyper personalized world, where it literally comes down to n is equal to 1. It's not about a segment any longer. It is not about a customer base any longer. It has to be n equal to 1. So that led us to then start thinking about the only way to do this is if we have control over the data that we have, not just the data we are generating, but also the data sets that are outside of us. So then we started investing quite heavily in building our own data lake. And we call it a data lake house, our data village, and so on and so forth. There's lots of terminologies floating around. But it's a data lake because it does transactional processing, analytics engine, AI, ML, everything can be driven on top of a single location of all of the bank's data in one location, including external sources and internal sources. So that's the journey that we have been on for the past 3-4 years. And largely, I think we are there. We have our lakehouse. It has become a data-driven organization in a truest sense. So that was just the beginning of our journey. That was not the end of our journey, because we still need to get to the better world part of it. All of that journey has got us into the best bank in the world. And then the next step is to really become the best banking for the better world. And that's where the unique elements that we are now meshing all together is, and people can't talk about AI and ML without touching on metaverse nowadays, right? So we started bringing in the metaverse as well. And it's not just about conversational AI in the sense of a chatbot, but can we start building in emotionally into the chatbot? How do we communicate the intent? How do we communicate the context? How do we ensure the chatbot really understands the elements of what is being said, and so on and so forth? Two big shifts that we have done without really getting into a lot of detail there. From a reactive or a responsive algorithms on which the chatbots are traditionally built on, we started shifting about 2.5-3 years back into generational algorithms. What it does is the generative algorithms actually start learning on their own, as opposed to a pre-fed set of sequences on which the response need to be given. And we started building that natively into the bots that we originally started conceptualizing and architecting and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. The first go-to market was a more traditional chatbot where it will respond to a set of queries from the customer and so on and so forth. But behind the scenes, it was continuously learning by using the generational algorithms that we built. Right. So now we're at a point where we can actually start humanizing the chatbot interactions. About 95% of our traffic actually comes through the chatbots today. We are able to do the customer servicing through our bot with a lot of emotional intelligence built into it. So that's one segment. The second segment, we are actually kicking it up into the next year, in the sense that we take this into metaverse, where we invite our customer into the metaverse along with us without having to come physically come to a bank branch or whatever. We are then able to have a human or a humanoid, if I may call it so, interact with our customer in terms of understanding what their product needs are, what their servicing needs are. Is this product really suited? And goes back to the word that I used earlier, n is equal to 1. So at each step of the way, we are able to scale massively by virtue of leveraging a humanoid type of a thing in the metaverse type of a concept and bring it all together. So those are some of the use cases that we have been on, Manoj.
That's very interesting, Shrikant, for giving the background and the progress so far. Before we move on to more interactive session, let's hear from Gokul, what he sees as a better world, as a n equals 1. Where is technology taking us?
And it's interesting, right? Of the folks, you're all from the industry with banks and of course BFSI, insurance from Deepu, etc. And I come from a technology perspective, which has been heavily investing in conversations and automation around conversations, right? So it would almost look like to this panel that I'm here to talk on behalf of the machines, not on talk of the humans. I can totally imagine that being your first sentiment. But this is where we did a pivot even before COVID hit, right? And this has always been our motto that we have been working with is automation is not necessarily to replace humans. Always has been our philosophy. We believe that the human plus machine is not a 1 + 1, it is a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of a situation. Honestly, our solutions, in fact, are named that way as well. We call them agent assist. We are in the contact center, customer care and outbound automation piece of it, but we look at it from an agent assistance. How do you take a normal agent, a call center agent, who's part of everyday conversations, inbound or outbound, and speech is obviously playing a significant part of those conversations. How do you make that agent become a super agent? Always has been about it, which is why in certain geographies we have said that you got to do upsell on revenue, cross-sell on existing customers, which is much more significant than just automating it and going to a certain bot, whether it is chat or speech or any of those other channels, right? So been heavily investing on a assistance to a human, and some of our recent acquisitions in the past 6 months have also been on the agent experience and how it gets better.
Thank you, Gokul, for that insight. I want to come to Deepu and Shrikant at this point and explore with you what has been your journey in terms of understanding emotions from the point of view of customer engagement. So maybe Deepu and Shrikant, you can share from insurance and banking perspectives.
I think, Manoj, that's a very relevant question, because as we speak about digital transformation and digital customer experience and moving from man to machines, I think the emotional angle is one which we need to be cognizant of, because customers, when they call you, they don't normally call you during good times, right? They call you when they are in deep stress. So which is why we need to take cognizance of the emotional landscape. So there are 2-3 angles there. One is this evergreen focus on the human side of it, which is that when a customer is emotional, you hear him out completely, because you need to give him room to vent himself, and that's evergreen, right? It doesn't matter whether you offer digital customer servicing or whether you offer human servicing, but that's evergreen clearly. The other is, and I think that is a more pointed response to your query, that we also need to ensure that when we train our folks, because if you look at most training programs, there is a lot of focus on the technical aspects. Do you know how to manage data? Can you manage multiple screens? But it's equally important to train people on EQ, right? EQ is the way we typically understand, how strong somebody's emotional quotient is, right? Which is your own emotional quotient as well as, an understanding of how others' emotions are. And very often, that can carry the day for you. We have seen some firms, experts in the area of customer assessment, who come back and tell us that sometimes it's not just about telling the no, but it's how do you convey the no. That makes a big deal of difference to customers, and that's where EQ comes in. So I think the softer aspects, in terms of EQ and how do you manage, how do you listen to customers, how do you manage customers, clearly something that's part of our entire training landscape. So that's one way by which you manage the emotional dimension. The other aspect, Manoj, going back to our theme today, is how do you carry this through, when you get into your digital transformation and digital servicing at scale?
Exactly.
So one thing which firms are doing, and that's where even Gokul can throw some light, is how do you get, for example, get bots to mimic human behavior? Because we need to understand customers, right? You cannot get into a conversation where the answers are cut and dry, right? You'd like to have a human conversation, right? It's not that, tell me your problem and I'll just resolve it, right? You want to have a hi, how are you doing? How's the weather, right? So you need to get bots to mimic human beings, so there's a lot of, work going around that. And the other aspect is conversational AI. How do you get, AI going, but at the same time, you make it more conversational. And, we have taken steps in this area, so a lot of our, digital assets, where we service customers, we have brought in this emotional quotient angle, and our customers are, increasingly feeling more comfortable. So which is why I stated even at the beginning that now it's, shifted from, digitizing the physical. That's taken for granted now to how do you keep, humanizing the digital. And even the form factor there matters. For example, we can leverage voice in a big way, because in text, you cannot make out the emojis, right? You can't make out the emotional, sentiment. So when you get into, form factors like voice and video, you're able to bring in a lot more.
Srikanth, what has been your thinking and experience?
Two examples I want to share, and it's quite an interesting set of experiments that we've been running. And typical to DBS, where our culture is a lot about experimentation. And the idea behind experimentation is that there is no one single answer that you'll get to right away. So you have to run a series of experiments, and only then we'll be able to learn truly what needs to be built. That has been a cornerstone of how we've approached technology. In that same spirit of experimentation, what we've done is we've actually launched a bot internally first, even before we launch it to the outside customers. And what this bot does, and quite interestingly, it's actually named One Bot. Okay, launched and available for all the employees of DBS. And any type of a query can be posted there. It could be an HR related query, it could be a finance compensation related one, it could be something that I'm struggling with and I need some knowledge and expertise on, and so on and so forth. This entire bot is available to us across the organization, across all locations, across all markets. That means all of a sudden you've got 30,000 people available for you to respond to. And then imagine the kind of human interactions that will flow through that bot. That gives us an extremely rich set of insight into what's on people's mind, what is it that they're expressing, how they're expressing, and so on and so forth. So that's a richness that we are able to extract out of it, even before this gets launched for public service in that sense, for our customer service in that sense.
So you're like getting the sentiment from across the organization.
Exactly, because it touches on multiple facets, right? I mean, there is a HR element, there is a finance element, all of these kinds of things come in. And lots of these sentiments do get expressed by the employees internally, of course, quite freely. And building on what Deepu said, customers typically would call us when there is a problem. And in the same sense, employees would also go to the bot when they have a query to be resolved. So that gives us a lot of context and an element of richness that we started running on. Then we took all of that intelligence that we were able to gather and then build these additional bots that can go service the customer in a conversational way. And so, of course, some of these features of engaging the person that is interacting with me in a more interactive fashion, in a conversational fashion, rather than a sequence of queries being responded to. So that's the next level of evolution that we are looking at. So that's one. Second, we learned from this and we said, as part of, recently we had this acquisition of a bank called Lakshmi Vilas Bank in India, and that we are in the process of merging that entity into DBS. One of the realizations there is, and at the same time, we were also going through COVID phase and so on and so forth. So we said, how do we leverage this and leverage this at scale? Is the concept of Sky RMs. An RM is a relationship manager, right? So typically in a banking industry, the relationship manager is assigned depending on the net worth of a particular customer. But what we've realized is it need not be the case. But if you're able to bring these two at scale and create a concept of a Sky RM, where it is cloud-based, the relationship manager need not physically go there, but it can still be a machine. But the customer that is interacting with me, regardless of what segment or what size I am in, I still have a personal relationship with my bank. Behind the scenes, we can leverage something as that because we are powered by technology. It could still be a machine, but the customer would never know. As far as the customer is concerned, there is a relationship manager that the bank has assigned to me, and I'm able to interact with them. So that's the second evolution that we've been able to successfully deploy as part of our initiative called Sky RMs. So, and that's something that's currently in existence right now.
That's fantastic. Two very meaningful examples Gokul, what would you say to these kind of experiments, to these kind of approaches? Are these the dominant approaches that you're seeing across in the financial sector?
Yep.
Or is there a third or fourth approach that is also making a lot of sense?
So bear with me while I go through some of the things that we are doing, right? But before that, the running joke in the industry is that DBS is a technology company that incidentally does banking. and I think based on what Srikanth has been talking in the last 20 minutes, I'm almost beginning to think that it is not a joke, but it's really, really serious. I mean, clearly they're doing some very cool stuff there. But let me address it in two ways, right? And the first one is very simple. The second one is I got to walk you through a kind of series of motion on what we are putting in place there. The first one is when we design flows, right? A bot flow, an assist flow, whichever flow that we are talking about, the first thing that we do is our developers here, our partnerships with multiple SIs, we make sure that that is a cultural thing where we are saying that you got to design a flow as if you are the end customer. In fact, we go down the path of even finding within our organization folks that are already customers of that entity that we are servicing to, because you got to drink your own champagne in that sense, right? Similar to what Srikanth is saying. So we actually go down that path. And in cases where we don't find any, we actually become members of those organizations. We register into those so that we first know what is the experience before and then after our deployment. That we actually do. And we have designers, we have got VUI designers, as we call it, conversational AI designers. But the humanization is very important. And the only humanization, the best way to do humanization is for personalization. It got to be personal. How would you deal with the bot that you have developed? That is the best answer. If you are happy with it, you reasonably 80% of the population will be happy with that, right? That is the fundamental philosophy that we have. And that is a significant shift that we did. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we would have just gone and said, what is happening today? How does it look today? We will just go and mimic it. We don't do that anymore. We do it as if it is from scratch, and how do we make it better? That's the first part of it. The second part is, from a technology perspective, we have this unique differentiation of following a platform approach. And this is why you got to bear with me while I walk you through that, right? Our platform has got multiple products, conversational AI being one of them, which is the speech bot side of it. Now, what does a speech bot do? It's supposed to look at what interactions have happened in the past through maybe people listening to it and figuring out what the intents of the different callers have been in the last few months, years, etc. And then you design a flow to kind of see you mimic that experience on a bot. But we also have our speech analytics solution that historically looks at all those kind of calls. Again, the machine does that for you. You don't have humans listening in 200 hours, 300 hours to go and mimic that onto a bot. Our speech analytics solutions, which is on the same platform, goes and does that. So what it does is it would know what kind of calls have come in from an intent perspective so that you can go and mimic that on the bot. But more importantly, it also listens to how the agent has spoken to a customer on that specific intent. Was empathy shown by the agent? Was for a certain kind of query, how did the agent address it? Those pieces are taken from that agent, and that agent learning goes into our bot presentation or the VUI or the visual presentation to the customer. Typically, what bots in the past have done is, and including us in the past, is we have only seen what the customer intent is and done that on the bot. But now we are seeing how the agent response is also there, because we are speech analytics. We listen to both sides of the conversation. We go take that part of it and go ahead and implement it on the bot side on the response. So intent mapping has always been a conversational AI feature, but for the first time, we are also response to that by an agent is something that we have added, which has made it more, never human-like, right? Humans are humans, and there is a machine-like. And credit to a majority of population, not just in India, but across geographies. Though I run APAC, my counterparts in the US, Europe, everybody has said this is, there's more, there is with Siri, with multiple voice technologies, that you are now interacting with a bot is seemingly more agreeable to majority of the public than what it was, say, maybe 36 months ago. All right. So that part of is very critical, that we have taken the agent response to that and also integrated it. And that makes it easy for Uniphore because we are a single platform that learns from itself. Our AI is not just learning from customers, but it's also learning from itself, which is, I think, is a critical. One product actually feeds into another, where we build that ecosystem within our products to get each one of those products significantly more mature as the time goes.
Wonderful, Gokul. The last part was quite something different and new. I'm just curious, two questions follow up on that. One is, if the learning is happening within one customer organization, does that learning flow into your product on a generic basis, or that learning remains for that customer?
Excellent, brilliant question. And this actually leads to one of my peeve problems as well. And I think you kind of gave me a great segue, right? We are a cloud first company, and I'll tell you why that is relevant to the question you're saying. We are a cloud first company. We typically would like our software to run on a cloud. I mean, operationally, it would be great, and leave out the operations piece, which is all anyway cloud gets in. Cloud, yeah. But when you are on the cloud, every customer gets to learn from what it would be for another customer, because the software is learning, and it's easy for that information to flow in the same vertical. See, there is a speech element, which is how you talk, accents, which are generic in nature. There is a vertical element, which is insurance, banking, e-com. They will have certain similarities. And then on top of that pyramid, you will have the customer specific piece. Customer specific will always be customer specific. So generic, which is accent, speech, etc., is probably 40-50%. Vertical is probably 20-30%. And then on top is another 20-25%. Now, the middle layer is really where, if you are on the cloud, the benefits of one customer learning comes to the other. But I also understand, and that's one of my, hopefully, some of the legalities around cloud and the security recommendations are quickly addressed by all the authorities. I know there are certain verticals within this within India which are more prone to cloud versus on-prem, where some of those benefits are being lost as of today. But in general, globally, if you look at it, there is a vertical based learning. So if you have learned something on a certain insurance or a certain bank based on these are the kind of calls that are coming in and these are the kind of responses that agents give, that 90-95% can be used in another customer instance.
Okay. There are some agents that do very well, high empathy, high knowledge, high understanding of the industry. And then there are agents who may be freshers and who don't understand the industry that well, who may even be part-time, who may have a lower EQ. Does your system have the ability to take more learning from the experts and kind of lesser from the less experts? Is there some way for the system to do that? Because it should not end up losing what the experts are bringing into the situation, into the platform.
Yep. Brilliant question. Thanks for that again, Manoj, for letting me segue into the next piece of it. So I'll first talk about there are two aspects to your question, right? How does the system behave differently for a fresher or a person who's getting onboarded versus how does it behave for a person who is more mature, has been in the system and is basically higher on the overall scale, right? The first thing that we do is, and again, this came through an acquisition in the last 6-7 months, is the biggest problem in the BPO industry. And incidentally, I was talking to another BPO earlier today. They were saying that it's become so, the name BPO and the industry, the attrition is extremely high. Correct, which means that for them to start onboarding agents, get them from wherever they are, onboard them and get them ready to take a call is typically a 12 to 16 week exercise as it stands today. That's the most mature ones, take 12 to 16 weeks. There are others who take even close to 18 to 24 weeks to get them to handle the first call. what we have done is, and again, as I said, we acquired a company which has got workflow automation there, where based on which agent, what is their maturity, if there are newer agents, we start to, while the call is going on, they are coached live on what are they supposed to say based on what the customer is saying, which essentially means your training time, which was typically, as I said, 12 to 16 weeks for them to be onboarded, is cut down by 50% now to probably 6 to 8 weeks at best.
Okay.
That's the first part. That is for agents who are just coming right there. This does not come out of any contact center or quality budget. This actually comes from the learning and development budget, right? Because you're learning, developing, that's all cut down significantly. That's a big automation right there. You're not reducing people, you're reducing time. So many times we are always looking at automation as reducing FTEs, but actually reducing time is the biggest automation you can think of, right? So that's the first part. The second thing which is relevant to your question is, let's say there are agents, they have been onboarded, they've been in the system for a while. I said speech analytics does both side, right? Both on the agent side as well as on the customer side. Traditionally, agent quality, which is listening, somebody who's been listening to calls, manually somebody would listen to calls, and that too probably 2% of the overall calls. I mean, there's literally no way you can do 100% monitoring manually. Our quality automation tool would go and listen to that, all the calls, 100% of the calls for all agents. And then we start scoring first agent wise, who's better. Then we kind of segment them as laggards, leaders, medium performers. We have a high level view on that. So in any organization, you know who are the leaders, who are the laggards, and who are the medium performers, number one. Number two, you can then double click into it, deep dive into it, and figure out why is the leader a leader and why is a laggard a laggard. You may very well figure out that the leader is doing very well in certain parameters. The leader themselves may still have certain things that they need to be coached on. For example, they may be brilliant cross-seller upsellers, which is why they're having a high score, but they could be very low on empathy. They could be very low on compliance, but yet, because a lot of the customers have higher weightage on the lead, on the cross-sell upsell, which is very important to almost everybody, they are doing well. So the 100% of the automation will go and look at which part of it is the leader good in, and then what is he or she doing, making them a leader, and then transfer that knowledge to the laggards. Now that transfer of knowledge is not an automated piece, right? I mean, if you are saying, if you find out that agent A is a leader because he or she is doing a great upsell, cross-sell, and agent B is not doing that well, it becomes a training exercise, which is maybe the data that is not coming in fast enough for agent B, whereas it's really doing well for agent A. And then we use our assistance tool, which I talked about, to go and coach this person, agent B, live on the call to make sure that they are doing better. That is why the platform approach is excellent for us, because what is coming out as an input for quality is actually being fed into our agent assistants real time to go and help this agent doing that. Yep.
Let me ask Srikanth and Deepu at this point, can you put a business angle to this? Where do you see these kind of things helping with claims? Where do you see helping with cross-sell? Where do you see helping with collections or leakages? Where do you see it with the KYC and onboarding of customers? There are so many different kinds of customer interface situations where this kind of new development, new platform, new learning L&D, automated L&D that Gokul has described. What are some of the best cases for applying these in a bank and in insurance? Srikanth, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think maybe I'll pick one or two use cases that that is something that we've been looking at. There are a whole host of things that you just touched on, Manoj, including KYC, collections, claims processing, and so on and so forth. The use case that we are going after, number one, is co-creation, where we are able to get the customer to really come in and engage with us in a metaverse type of an environment that I mentioned earlier, and say, can I personalize this product even before I start buying a product or a service from the bank? Can I start engaging upfront so that I know exactly what I'm going to get? And that's where our hyper personalization comes in. And therein automatically it demands a degree of empathy. And one of the things our CEO, Mr. Piyush Gupta, always talks about, he says, I want our guys to be engaging with the customers the way you'd engage, or the way you'd conduct yourself with your mother, right? So always imagine that you're actually working with your mother, or you're servicing your mother on the other side. That don't assume. And of course, the ongoing joke is, as long as it's not the mother-in-law, we are okay, right? But all the jokes aside, I mean, that's the philosophy that we are trying to drive across that. And what we thought is the best way to do that is that we engage our customer to co-create and bring them in, and then start participating in the product design. And the intent behind that is, if you imagine, we are not engaging with the customer towards the tail end and saying, here is my product, and then take them the journey. We have entirely left shifted this engagement with the customer all the way from product creation to consuming the product and then servicing the product. So thereby you're staying in the journey, and thereby a lot of context comes in, the empathy gets built in and stuff like that. So that's one of the great realizations that we've had. It's start with co-creation and then stay on with the journey. Thereby automatically we'll start building in the degree of empathy, and then an engagement comes in. And of course you have to do it at scale. So that's when you start leveraging technology to do this at scale. Some of the bot concepts come into play because of that. So that's one element that we've been looking at. The more important underpinnings for this, and that's also another realization for us, is we have to do this only if you have a framework that dictates how to responsibly use this data. And without that, there is a room for a lot of these conversations and interactions and all of these things also getting in a sideways. So we actually invested quite a bit of time and energy in figuring out what is a responsible use of data looks like first, and then started building on top of it, right? So then, even if I tomorrow launch off into, let's say, a collections type of a mode or a KYC mode and so on and so forth, my underpinnings of the framework will hold me to that, and I'm not using the data inappropriately. And in fact, quite incidentally, the framework is called PURE, P-U-R-E. Okay. And it stands for P for purposefulness, and U for unsurprising. And that in itself says, if I'm engaging with a customer, and it could still be a bot, but the customer should not be surprised to say, how did you know this, right? So it has to be unsurprising to the customer. And R is responsible use. Just because you have an intelligence, don't demonstrate it, and then don't engage in an untoward type of a thing. And then E stands for explainable. At the end of it, the customer should automatically know, because I'm speaking to and the machine is collecting this, in spite of it, he or she is able to understand how that particular thing has been derived, right? It's not done in a immature fashion. So the PURE framework is underpinning. On top of it, we are building several of these engagement models. And the idea is to try and left shift to the extent possible.
Deepu, some examples from your side and from insurance in general as to how these new platforms that are enabling intelligence and emotional intelligence and automated learning, how can they be deployed in insurance?
Yeah. No, I think, building on from what Srikanth said, it applies equally in our industry as well. Because ultimately you're dealing with customers, and of course you're dealing with distributors, because the difference is insurance is also distribution-led business. So you should also take into account distributors, right? It's a B2C model. So, from both angles, how do you bring in, technology which caters to emotions to ensure that, they are taken care of.
Yes.
One which I'll pick right away, and I'll use the, the framework which, Srikanth spoke about, and I'll pick the unsurprising bit, is claims, right? We all know it's a moment of truth, in the insurance industry. And, that's precisely, where, this can come in. So if you look at motor claims, for instance, one is, we've empowered customers. Earlier, customers had to physically call a surveyor in case they crash their car. Today, all they need to do is, basically take photographs and upload them using the mobile app. And up to certain amounts, we have an AI engine which kicks in, assesses that, and then, the fund transfer can happen in as little as 20 minutes. We've been able to revolutionize that. In that entire interaction, empathy-based, platforms, play a big role, because it's not only about processing the claim, like to the point that I made earlier in 20 minutes, but you also listen to the customer, you basically, resolve his queries, and, you ensure that, you go about it in an absolutely smooth manner. So that's one clear example which we see in motor insurance. The other is, in the area of health insurance. It's also one of the fastest growing lines of, insurance in the market today. So when you look at the whole, health insurance, ecosystem, especially during the pandemic, customers do not come to you only, during the time of claims, right? Now I'll go the other way. I'll say it's not only about claims, it's also about, other areas, that they come for. during COVID-19, they had a lot of queries, right? What is going to happen? And they were also worried about contact tracing. So at that time, we had launched, an AI-driven bot, which by leveraging empathy would basically handle all the queries that customers had. And they were very happy with that because it clearly showed them that, we went, beyond the core need of insurance. And when we got an NPS study done in the marketplace, we found that, we enjoyed the highest scores and by a significant gap over our competitors. So clearly another area, where, clearly voice and technology, along with empathy, played a big role. The third is going beyond, customer stated needs. Again, I'll pick an example from health. What happened at that time? There was huge stress on the healthcare system, and people couldn't get access to, medical infrastructure, if they had minor ailments, because everybody was prioritizing COVID-19, cases. So at that time, by deploying empathy, customers could log into our mobile app and get a digital consultation, done with our empaneled set of doctors. They got loads of empathy, and they got emotional support, and they were also able to get, digital prescriptions based on which, they could go out and buy medicines. And again, customers were extremely thrilled because this again, went beyond core insurance offering. So these were, clear, tested and, examples at scale, which showed how we could bring in emotions, we could bring in empathy, and we could bring in technology.
Please shed some light on what you think the video applications, the key video applications will be. We have already seen video KYC, but that's just 1% of the journey for a customer. Where do you see more and more video getting used? And so one is plain video like we are doing today, but where is video with some kind of AI going to come and play a meaningful role?
See, Uniphore is a conversations company, always been in, and clearly we understood that video conversations are the way moving forward. After COVID, the post-COVID world, we have done enough surveys at this point to know that video conversations, video meetings like the one that we are doing today are still going to be very relevant even in the post-COVID world. It will go down as a percentage, but the volume still will continue. Clear. We have done enough studies to show that. Now, what we have done is, and this is just come out in the last 1 month, as I told you, Uniphore has been focusing on contact center automation in the past, but we are now expanding that to conversations that we are having today. Conversations is not just with a customer and an agent. Conversations are what we are having today. And what we call Q, that is the product that Uniphore released a month ago, which came in as an acquisition of a European organization almost 12, 18 months ago, and we kept it under wraps. We simply could not talk about that before, but now that it's been formally released, we can. It does facial recognition, it does emotion detection on a call. So simple example, let's say that all the attendees were on video today, and obviously when Deepu talks, everybody's eyes light up. When Srikanth talks, everybody is excited just based on their facial recognition. And maybe when I'm talking, it is kind of boring them down. I could get the kind of a feedback that these are the point of interest to the listener, and I can start tuning my conversations on that. Now, let's say that when we were talking about speech analytics, let's say that a lot of them got excited. While I was talking about conversational AI, they started looking at their phones or their eyes started to, kind of droop. I would get that feedback and I can start talking in a different way. So kind of, moving your conversations to what is engaging the listener is something purely based on facial expressions, is something that we are heavily invested on at this point in time. Have done a couple of betas as well. So it is not just something I'm talking about. These are something that is ongoing from a beta customers, especially in North America, which we have done this. And truly, I think that is going to be a game changer. What that's going to do is expand that to multiple arenas, right? And we play a significant edtech space right now. What other better way to do this when a teacher and an entire set of students are online and the teacher teaching that, right? How would you monitor whether XYZ is not listening, ABC is more attentive, whether they're understanding, not understanding? It just throws open the entire edtech space for us. We have got interesting suggestions on, can you start using this for auditions for movies as well. Facial expression. I mean, what else can you think about when movies? Can you use that for auditioning people? All those things. The video facial piece that we have been talking about is going to be an absolute game changer.
Deepu and Srikanth, from the two lines, insurance and banking, what do you see as some of the early adoptions, early use cases for leveraging video?
There was one use case that we were about to launch in 2020, and we sort of scaled back on it eventually because of COVID. But the use case that we went after, and that's where the coexistence comes in, is for branch banking. Right? So it's a combination of IoT technologies and video technologies, where when the tellers are stacked up in a branch, and then there is an inflow of customers coming in, how do we manage the queue in such a way that it is always balanced? Right? There are various emotions with which the customer is walking in. It could be because they are in a haste, or they are coming in because they're worried about certain things, or they are in a bit of a relaxed mode, although the line is a little big, they are still okay. Right? So a few things that happen in that branch banking as we envisaged, Manoj. Number one, if the line is too long, and do we have to automatically invoke maybe an extra set of tellers to come in and make sure that these customers are getting serviced? Because the frustration start building up in their faces and it shows, right? So the video is able to detect that and then able to deploy, activate additional set of tellers. That's one. Second, when the customers start coming in, and again, it comes back to the line or the queue they're standing in, is are they in some sort of a haste? You know, depending on, let's say, a senior citizen walks in and you've got a whole bunch of teenagers in front of them, or, you know, middle-aged people and so on. Do we want to activate it in such a way that they're pulled out of the line, serviced immediately without having to wait for their turn? Right, so that the customer empathy, it goes back to ultimately it all boils down to how engaged are you with your customer and how do you empathize with them is what we were trying to leverage. We could not go live on account of B2020 branch banking and stuff like that, but that is something that we were ready to launch, and that's one of the real-time use cases that we could think of.
Okay, interesting. Deepu, what industry examples and Bajaj Allianz examples do you envisage?
Yeah, see, video is a new book, right? As people say. So I agree with Srikanth, that video along with voice and text, and the current form factors that we have, they all can coexist. So I'll give you a quick peek into what happened in the past and what we could see going forward. During the pandemic, video helped in a big way because when everybody is working remotely and you can't explain, we were able to convert all our SOPs into video libraries. So somebody wants to learn how to process a refund, somebody wants to learn how to file a claim, just send him a quick 2-minute video on WhatsApp to anybody, distributor, customer, or a partner. They learn it and they get going. So I think that's one. The other is, if you see a lot of firms, for example, let's take claim processing, right? You want to basically examine. Today you can use video through live streaming and including leveraging technology. By sitting in one place, you could actually examine, let's say, plant and machinery of another place, in a remote location, actually do an assessment, and then get back to the client. So that's, one thing which is already in vogue, right? And that is, likely to explode as, the world shrinks and, we get used to this hybrid way of working.
One more example from you, Deepu, if feasible, about interaction, human to human interaction using video for the insurance. For example, fraud detection will be a area where insurance companies could benefit.
More than fraud, video interaction happens, for example, let's take, branches, right? Let's take, now there are a lot of places where we don't have brick and mortar branches. So there you have a person, who's basically getting onto a video, somebody comes online and then he has an interaction, with the remote customer service agent, sitting at a location and, the conversation takes place. That is something that's already on, it's already in vogue. So video is already on. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
The question that's always asked, and I'm sure most of the attendees also have that, is highly regulated industries, right? Insurance, extremely regulated. Banking is to a certain extent definitely regulated when you look at other verticals. How do you still manage to innovate as much as you do? And does it stifle some of your innovations from a regulation perspective?
I think the regulator has been very proactive, Gokul. There are a lot of, regulator and industry, coordination committees, whereby suggestions are taken. The other is a sandbox initiative, which the regulator launched, whereby, you can submit proof of concept, and then get an approval and scale it up. So I see the regulator actually being, very proactive in terms of, aiding transformation.
I'm glad to know.
Yeah, in my own opinion, Gokul, I would say the regulators are quite progressive in that sense. Sandbox is a great example in that sense. Or else we would not be doing the kind of experiments that we are running,
Sure.
right? So, very surprising, in my own personal opinion. They're actually quite progressive and forward thinking, and enables these kinds of technologies to be adopted.
That's music to our ears. So that's
Gokul, I want to add to this that more constraint than this is a generic worldwide finding. More you put constraints, the more it forces the mind to innovate. If you have less constraints, if you can do anything, then you will do anything because there is no constraint. The moment you have fewer choices, for example, chess is a game that it's a game of constraints essentially. You make one wrong move and kind of you're finished. So that's where I wouldn't say innovation, but the really use of the mind, usage of the mind, application of the mind goes up whenever there is more constraints. That's a general human nature as such. Thank you all very much for this wonderful interaction.
thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you, Gokul. Thank you, Srikanth. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Guys.